Welcome back, everybody. This is Miss Klink, and the purpose of this video is going to be reviewing how to do partial quotients. So we will start with, I'll go through the steps of what's been helpful for kids in the past, and that way if you have any questions you can contact me. So we're going to start with something really simple and short. So we'll do 2 divided into 24. So let me go to a new color. The first thing I do before I do anything with the problem is I write down my multiples. So I always write my multiples, just the first 9 of your divisor, which is the 2. So I'm going to put them off to the side here. So 2, 4, and the reason I only put the first 9 is because since we're only going to be dividing into a single digit, or a digit that only requires a single number out to the side here, there's really no other reason to go any farther than 10, but that's okay if you want to go farther than 10. So I'm going to first of all look inside at my 24. I have to decide how many digits to box in. Well, if I compare my divisor to my first digit, just the 2, I can see that they're the same. So whenever your divisor is the same or less than the first digit, you only have to box in 1. So I can box in just the 2, and now I'm going to look over at my multiples and see how close can I get to 2. Well, look, we can hit right on it. But we're not going to put the 2 out to the side. We're going to see how many times did I need to, how many multiples of 2 did it take to get to 2? Well, it only took the first multiple to get to 2. So I'm going to put a big 1 out here. It's my first multiple. So then I look and see if there's any placeholders. So placeholder is looking inside and seeing, do I have any digits that are not boxed in? Well, check it out. The 4, there's only 1 digit that's not boxed in. So that would be a 1, 0. So we're turning a 1 to a 10. So now we need to take that 10 and multiply it by our divisor. So I'm going to put a tiny little 2. We like to say this is 10 times 2, because once we get to the end, it'll be obvious which partial quotients we need to add up. So 10 times 2 is pretty easy. It's 20. But we could have also looked at, oh, it's the second. I had circled my 2, so that's where this 2 comes from. And adding 1, 0 means I have to add 1, 0 to the 2. So I take my 20 and subtract it from the 24, and I get 4. Well, I have to keep going because the answer I got, this 4, is greater than my divisor. So now, since there's only 1 digit left, obviously I can only box in 1 digit. So I'm going to look over at my list of multiples and see how close can I get to 4. Well, I can hit right on it. So it took 1, 2 multiples of 2 to get to 4. So that would be a big 2, and there's no placeholders because everything's been boxed in. So I put a tiny times 2, and I get 4. I subtract my 4, and I get 0. So it means there's no remainder. But I have to find my quotient, which is the answer to a division problem. So to remember how I said you can write these real big, so I circled the 2 digits I wrote really large, and I add them together. So 10 plus 2 is 12. So my quotient is 12. So now that we've seen a real simple one, we'll show you one that's a little more complicated. Let's do 3 divided into 415. So as usual, I'm going to write my multiples of 3 off to the side. Separate them a little bit. So I have to decide, of course, how many digits do I box in? Well, if I compare my divisor to my first digit, my 4, I notice that the 3 is smaller than 4. So I only have to box in one digit. Just think, if the divisor is smaller, you have to box in a smaller amount of digits. If it's larger, box in a larger amount. So how close can I get to 4? Well, I can't get any closer to 4 without going over, and 3 is the closest I can get. So I'm going to, that would be it only took one multiple of 3 to get there, so I put a big 1 across here, and I have 2 placeholders because these 2 digits are not boxed in. So I'm going to put 100. So of course we have to multiply it by the divisor, so we put a teeny tiny 3, and that is worth 300. I subtract my 300, and I get 115. Of course this is way bigger than my divisor, so I have to keep going. But how many digits do I box in? Well, if I look at just my 1, 3, my divisor, is bigger than 1. So since it's bigger, I have to box in a bigger number of digits. Well, I can't box in more than 2. So I can box in the 11. So how close can I get to 11? Well, 9 is the closest I can get without going over. And that's the 1, 2, 3. It's a third multiple of 3. So it took 3 3s to get to 9. But we still have our 5 is our placeholder. So I had to put 1 0 in. And of course I need to multiply it by a divisor. So I'm going to put a tiny little 3. And since I circled my 9, it won't be hard to figure out what 3 times 3 is. That's 9. 1 0 turns into 90. So I subtract my 90. Now be careful to make sure that you're seeing if you need to borrow. 5 minus 0 is 5. 1 minus 9, oh, we have a big bottom situation. So we cannot do it. So we have to borrow from the hundreds, turn it to a 0, and 1 turns into an 11. So 11 minus 9 is 2, and oh no, the answer we get is still bigger than our divisor. So we have to keep going. Well, I notice that my divisor 3 is bigger than my 2. So I have to box in a bigger number of digits. I have to box in both the 2 and the 5. So what I'm going to do is see how close I can get to 25. Well, 24 is the closest I can get without going over. So let's count that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It takes 8 multiples of 3 to get to 24. So I'm going to put a big 8 times my little tiny 3 equals 24. Subtract my 24, and I get 1. So now we have an answer that's smaller than our divisor, but we can't break it down anymore. So that turns into our remainder, so we have a remainder of 1. And this time we have to add way more numbers. So we have 138. If you notice, you say it really closely, 138. You can hear the answer. Now, I would recommend adding it up. I only did that because, well, I ran out of room, so I wanted you to show you one way that you could hear the answer, and one way that to show you that, hey, if you do it if you get as close as you can get each time, you should be able to hear your answer most of the time.